Welcome back, everyone. This is episode 148 of the Jiu-Jitsu Dummies podcast. We're brought to you by the Black Belt Digital Marketing, Listen to the way I'm saying that. Anything you need to build your business on or offline, website design, Google Ads, graphic design, printing, we can absolutely help. Check us out at Black Belt Digital Marketing on Instagram or our website, bbdigitalmarketing.com. You can request a free review of your entire online presence today. My name is Milton Campus. I'm a black belt training out of South Florida. Christian behind the camera. No boat today. Womp, womp, womp. The boat doesn't come out unless we have an in-studio guest. So he's actually working on the last episode and the GoFundMe video for Academy Safe. So don't forget, everyone, to like, comment, download, share, click that subscribe button. We appreciate all the support. Don't forget, if you listen to the podcast on Google Play, everything's moved over to YouTube. So if you were somebody that listened to just the sound on Google Play, you can just go over to our YouTube channel, and it's at Jiu-Jitsu Dummies Podcast. And now the actual sound file, the actual podcast, like you would listen on, Apple Podcast or any of the other platforms, it's actually just on YouTube now. All right. So joining us today is Marine vet and black belt Todd Fox. Lots more. There's so much more that I can intro him with that I could be here forever, but we'll bring him in just a second. Let's do a couple of quick shout outs and then we'll bring Todd in. So we are brought to you by academysafe.org. Academy Safe is a nonprofit whose mission is to help clean up the martial arts industry by advocating for background checks and U.S. Center for Safe Sport certifications for all coaches and staff members at every academy throughout the United States. So it's any academy, not just jiu-jitsu, karate, wrestling. Wrestling is actually, if you're part of USA Wrestling, they're doing this already. So any discipline. So full disclosure, I am the founder and executive director of Academy Safe. Rob Ingram, the founder of McDojo Life, is our executive VP. So that's really cool. We actually, I guess this is the first time I might be saying it. Our last guest, or the guest before Rob on the last episode, Joe Scargill, who is a Secret Service agent, is actually on the board now. We had a long conversation. He wanted to help, and he is actually on the board now. So he's out there doing some podcasts now and hopefully talking about Academy Safe. And together, what we want to do is completely change the way people find and vet martial arts academies. Right? We want to give them a website registry that shows that these gyms are certified. There'll be other things like CPR, first aid certifications. Do you have security cameras, belt check, and lineage checks? So, we're really going to, it's not just about the background check, but it's other things that make an academy safe, right? We don't want to charge the academies listed there, though. So we want to really raise money, be able to do this without the academies bearing the burden of that cost. So we started a GoFundMe. The link is in the description wherever you're listening to us. So if you can help, you can put in a small donation, do a recurring donation, give us a larger donation. That's great. We certainly want to keep as much of this free as possible. We've also started a waiting list. So if you visit us at academysafe.org, you can actually submit your academy's information and keep up on announcements and updates on the full website that we're building. So very cool. Thank you to our friends over at Flow and Roll. Hands down the best custom gi and no-gi gear in the business. Don't believe us? Visit them on Instagram at flow_n_roll. And check out the custom designs they've created for academies across the country. If you want to order anything from their website, you can visit flowandroll.com and get 20% off with code JJD. If you are a gym owner, new, or you've been around, they have an incredible pre-order program so that you can get your gear for your students to stock up the academy. Just a little bit of money out of pocket. They put your stuff up for sale on their website under a team page, and then your entire academy, people that love you and want to wear your gear, they can go order it there. And the profit from that actually winds up paying for the order. So, again, it makes it easy for especially new academies that, you've got so many expenses when you're opening up. You can actually get all the gear that you need and have all of your students in your gis and rash guards. So if you want to email them, you can email them at flowandroll@gmail.com. Or if you go to the website, flowandroll.com, you can fill out the form on their website. It actually goes right into requesting information about the pre-order and custom gear. Okay. Last but not least, Leo Optics. Do I have my glasses? Yes, I do. Leo Optics is a sunglass and apparel company specializing in these types of signature bamboo sunglasses. They're founded in Southern California with products reflecting the BJJ lifestyle. So very cool. I always like to point out, right? This is the if people have seen this on this side, right? You got the red for black belt, but they'll actually put your rank. You've got to request it when you order. They'll put your rank right on the glasses on the inside, which I think is really, really cool. Check them out at leooptics.com and use code JJD. Let me say that again, code JJD for 10% off your order. All right, that's it. Let's get Todd in here. Not too bad, Todd. I'm sorry, man. I was trying to rush.
No, that's all good stuff. And let me start out by telling you that Academy is safe. I looked at it. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I've been talking about that kind of thing for a while. So if you send me a link for your GoFundMe, I'll hit you guys with some money, because I do believe in that cause. That's a great thing, and it's a good tool for people that don't know better.
I got chills, man. That's the response. I've been getting a lot of that kind of response, which is like, it's about time. It's about time somebody's trying to do something. Everybody knows McDojo Life, right? If you're online, you've seen one of his funny videos or outing black belts and things like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard me say this, but when I went to him with the idea, it was just an idea. I'm like, Rob, am I crazy? Is this something that I could do? I wasn't asking him to be on the board. Just wanted to get his advice, because he's been living in this dark area of martial arts for so long, outing these people. And, he'd been on the show 2 times previously, and he was telling me about like videos that he gets from people, like they want him to do a story, like literally gang rapes inside of an academy, or people wearing like their gym gear outside someplace and then it getting caught on video and then beating somebody or raping a girl. He's like, it gets dark. I'm like, how do you do this? Even just in the small amount of time that we've been doing it, and like really looking into the data on how many times like kids get, abused, sexually assaulted. It gets dark. And I asked him, how do you do this? And he's just like, it's not easy. You got to, you can't wear your heart on your sleeve, really. But, when I shared the idea, he was like, Milton, people have been trying to get me to do this for years. He's like, but I'm one man. He is McDojo. He's like, I can't do this on my own. And luckily, honestly, I could not do this if it wasn't for the marketing company that I own, because we're basically using that. Academy Safe is kind of like the client. We're handling it like a client. So we're just doing client work. So we're able to just throw it in the machine, and we're able to do everything that needs to get done. So we're lucky in that regard. I probably wouldn't have even had the idea or been able to do it if it wasn't for that. So I appreciate the kind words and the support, man. Every little bit will help. And we had a really interesting meeting with the company that does the background checks for Google. There is actually a product called Local Service Ads, and I do this for my clients now. I have to get them approved, and they have to go through a background check. So we talked to that company yesterday, which will give us the entire back end management part to make sure that we get all the certifications we need, and we're able to track it, date it, send out automated emails when somebody's certification is expiring. So we're in a really cool place, man. It's exciting. So again, thank you for the kind words, man. But I appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much. There's so much that you have going on. You're a very interesting man. Let's start out. I know we want to talk about the book, but let's start a little bit. Let's just kind of go do the obligatory. How did you find martial arts? When did you start your martial arts journey? And we'll go forward from there.
If we do a broad stroke, like martial arts across the board, I started martial arts in the mid 80s. So I was a young guy, like early teens. I wrestled, I did karate. I did some other kind of mixed martial arts, not MMA. And then while I was in the Marine Corps on recruiting duty, I was teaching karate at a gym in the St. Louis area. And a gym opened up next to me, a martial arts gym. And it was a Hicks and Gracie black belt that opened it up. And this was in 1996. And his name was Rodrigo Vaghi. And I went next door to see what it's about. He invited me to train. I came back a couple of days later to train when I had a little bit of downtime. And I went to train with him, and he's like, nobody, you train with my guys. And so he put me to train with some white belts, and they commenced to kicking the shit out of me, which was really the first time that I ever experienced that, because I was winning in like boxing smokers in the Marine Corps. I was, like a 900 wrestler. And so I was handled, and I got handled the first time by a kid who was probably like 16 and 140 pounds or something. And it was really, really hard for me to come back the next day and take an ass whooping again and again and again until, I kind of stopped that tide, obviously, and you know how to defend yourself a little bit, and then you start to become the attacker. And but yeah, that was around 96.
I want to ask a question about that moment, though, because I feel like a lot of it, if we stick with it, we had this moment. Even in the midst of that ass beating, you knew that this was something that you wanted to do and you had to learn. Did you have that like, oh, I'm home. I'm going to like this?
Yeah, well, I had both sides of it, right? So the first is the acceptance of what you're doing doesn't work well against something that you've never seen before and you've never heard about before.
Sure.
And so like I had, that moment of like, holy shit, I am practicing the wrong thing or not enough of the right thing. And there was that part. So I had to get over that. And then, of course, like I wanted that magic. That was absolute magic. So you got to think about the mid 90s. Like UFC is only a couple of years old. And even then, people don't really understand what Hoist Gracie's doing in the cage. It's weird stuff. So it was a different time, and in that time too, my instructor had literally just come from Brazil. He didn't speak English, and he didn't understand the dynamics of like lawsuits or laws or things like that. So he treated it as if he was in Brazil. So like you talk about things today, almost 30 years later, like dojo storming. And that was normal. That was totally normal. That was an accepted practice at our gym. Like somebody talk trash, you take all the guys, you show up at the gym and it's a fight.
Oh yeah. Is this out in Cali? Where did you, where was this? Where were you?
No, St. Louis.
Oh, St. Louis. Okay.
Yeah.
The Mecca of jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah, not so much, but at the time, in the Midwest, he was the guy, right? You have a Hickson Gracie black belt in the mid 90s in St. Louis. And, you had the activity in Southern California, which I was in the Marine Corps. So I spent a lot of time there. And you had the activity in New York and Florida. And that was pretty much it, right? You had California, New York, Florida. And then Carlson had a gym in Chicago and then Rodrigo in St. Louis. And that was it. So if you wanted to find jiu-jitsu, it was one of those places. So in the Midwest, it was a powerhouse. And we started what we call NHB. Now you'd call it MMA at the same time in 96. So when you start fighting MMA in 1996, you're on the front end of something, right? Now it's a mainstream sport. At the time, they were saying it's human cockfighting. So, we were well ahead of everything and no one accepted it. They're like, what the hell is that? What are you doing? Is that just like, is it karate or is it, wrestling or boxing or what are you doing? And that was a time John McCain was calling it human cockfighting and they were banning it everywhere. And we had to go to like Indian reservations and to other states and closed door stuff. So it was definitely on the front end of it.
Yeah. Wow. What does NHB stand for?
No holds barred.
No holds barred. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So like the Brazilian guys you'll hear them say vale tudo or anything goes.
Okay. Is that what that means?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No holds barred means vale. Yeah. Vale means go.
Anything goes, right? Like, yeah. In Spanish, like vale todo. Vaya, like vaya, like to go.
Vale.
So it's
no, vale todo. Vale todo. No hay diferencia.
Todo. Okay. Yeah. I get
vale
it. Yeah.
Todo. Vale todo in Spanish and vale tudo in Portuguese.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Makes sense. It sounds the same. So fast forward. So you are a Marine veteran.
I am.
Right. And we mentioned before the podcast, you're doing some training with the Marines currently, right?
I am, yeah.
We'll tell everybody. We've got a general waiting on us. I told you I was going to say it again.
Yeah.
We got the Marines waiting for us to finish the Jiu-Jitsu Dummies podcast. I just want to throw that
everybody's waiting on Jiu-Jitsu Dummies, including Marines.
But so tell us a little bit about that experience. And
so in my case, like one of the guys that kind of came up with me is a senior Marine Corps officer that is in charge of that program, the Marine Corps martial arts program, which is referred to as McMAPS. And they're constantly looking to improve it. So how are they addressing it? What is the spectrum of what they're doing? Are they able to handle the war fighting component, which would be the obvious parts, right? Because now we're talking about lethality and deadly force. Are they able to handle other duties? So one of the duties Marines do is Marine Security Guard duty, MSG duty, where they control the security, the internal security of the U.S. embassies overseas. They do humanitarian operations, so they'll deal with different societies and cultures, and it sometimes gets hands-on. If you deal with civil disturbances and things like that. Obviously nowadays active shooters become more common. So you have Marines out on recruiting duty and sometimes they end up being a first responder. So trying to address the full gamut. And then also at the same time, looking at maybe even standing up a competitive team that crosses over from kind of the lethal force component to a competitive aspect. And the Marine Corps already has obviously a boxing program. They already have a wrestling program. They already have the ethos and the mindset of jiu-jitsu, and that whole kind of realm is encapsulated in the Marine Corps. So they continue to develop it. I think all the branches are right now, and I'm starting to see even like the Brits, the British Royal Marines have a competitive team, and they're traveling around training at different gyms. So jiu-jitsu has been widely accepted by the Department of Defense and a bunch of branches of service.
That's awesome. I see. Are you in your home there? Is that a home gym?
Yeah, it's a home gym.
That's very
right
cool.
behind me.
You got all the goodies back there, including Elio watching over us, right?
A little jiu-jitsu, a little Muay Thai, a little bag work. I don't know if there's some boxes back there, some weights. So yeah, we got enough space back here to get like 4 guys back here training. And normally the rotation's like a couple guys doing bag work and like mitt work, and then behind us some guys rolling on the mat. So enough space to do what we need to do, especially if it's later at night or you have a COVID type situation where for whatever reason the government doesn't want us training. So
yeah. Does you know, as a business owner, or at least I've always heard, like sometimes when the hobby or the thing that's your happy place becomes the job, that it makes it less fulfilling. I mean, I don't know if it's the same for jiu-jitsu, because I love talking about jiu-jitsu. I love doing jiu-jitsu. If I'm not doing it, I want to talk about it. Does that change for you at all when it's just like, okay, I'm talking about it, I've got to do it in my, like, as part of my day job? We haven't talked about the executive protection side of things, but does it become any less fun or that stress reliever, that happy place that you go to?
Yeah, there's a difference, and it's not that jiu-jitsu is not the same for me, and it's not magic for me. It solves most problems, in my opinion. But where it changes is when you're not able to do it yourself. So if I'm just teaching and I'm not rolling at all, I'm not drilling at all, I'm not growing at all. I'm growing as a teacher, say, but not as a student. That's less fun for me. It's still good. It's still not like a real job. When I'm able to teach, but that's the component where sometimes your personal development slows down because you're working to develop other people. And the same thing happens. Like I was just talking to a friend, we have a IBJJF tournament coming around. I'm still competing, and I'm not going to compete in my hometown, because when you do that, what happens is you have all these students and you're coaching, you're screaming, you're yelling, you're emotionally committed to them. And then it's time for you to go, and you've just drained yourself of energy. Mm-hmm. And then you've got another student, on the side of you. So I think it's that give and take. And part of, the downside of teaching is that you're so focused, if you're doing it right, on other people, that your own personal development outside of teaching skills doesn't continue at the same rate. That for me is the little hurdle that you have to navigate.
A new black belt. I got my black belt in December.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I did actually change gyms recently, and I've only been at 3 schools now. My third being, I've only been there a month and a half. One of the things that I loved doing is teaching. I love training people at my marketing company. I love helping people with jiu-jitsu. At White and Blue, I was actually like a coach. I was a coach. Mm-hmm. It was a small gym. It was a family friend that opened it, so it was like his first blue belt. His first consistent student, and then his first blue belt. So I was coaching again. I started at 41, so I'm an adult. It wasn't like a little kid. Hey, can you coach? Literally never paid him for jiu-jitsu ever. We traded marketing, and then for jiu-jitsu lessons, and then I wound up coaching, and it was fine. I loved it. But it's definitely one of the things that I love to do. And now, 8 years later, going to a new gym, I've now been asked to like go coach at a different gym. Where I met somebody who did a seminar in our gym, and then they invited me to coach at their gym. I love that. The first day on the mats, my buddy was the coach. He was like, "Hey, you want to add anything here?" I love that aspect of it. And I was hurt, so I couldn't really roll. I've been hurt, so like training has filled that little hole in my heart. So helping people training and they just kind of like just being there. I haven't been there enough, but just being there is enough for me to get my jiu-jitsu fill until I'm able to get back on the mat. But I definitely love that side. And even though, I might not be getting my training in, sometimes I wind up like fine tuning something when I'm teaching, and I'm like, man, you got to put your foot there. And I'm like, man, I never put my foot there. I always forget that when I do it, so
Do
it's
as
little
I
things.
say, not as I do.
Yeah, it's almost like a little bit of mental training, but just being a part of it. And again, luckily, I get to do the podcast, so I'm talking to people about it. So again, if I'm not doing it, I love talking about it.
Yeah, no, you definitely have the ability to grow when you teach. I've been a teacher the whole time because at the time that I started, it was black belt and all white belts, and then once you got a blue belt, in whatever 97 or something like that, it was a big deal. So unlike now, where it's just normal, but I think you're making a good point, which is that if you enjoy teaching, you're much more apt to give and to learn the small details. I don't think there's much of a correlation between being a good competitor and being a predominant athlete and being a teacher. I think there's usually a disconnect because most of the guys that I work with who are great athletes are naturals and they're not able to break it down. The guys that are better teachers, as a rule, not always, tend to be guys that struggled and kind of had to fight along the way to find these things and understand these things. And like you said, the thing that I've found, and you're noting an injury, I've got, man, I can't even begin to tell you. We'd take 2 hours if I discuss my injuries. I just had a surgery from a fighting injury.
Oh yeah.
And so one of the things is it takes away, say, a limb. Like, you have surgery on your knee and it takes that away. And so now you got to figure out how do you work from this entanglement and how do you reduce, the movement of that limb and utilize to a greater degree other limbs. And so it changes your game and it changes the way you look at things. And a lot of times it actually propels you forward. You start thinking more about it. You start focusing more on it. So I'm with you on all the topics that you mentioned there.
Yeah. So now how did we get into you're a Marine? We're talking about helping out with the combatives. At what point did you start doing the what's called, you call it, right? I know I went to the website, tourprotection.com. But how did you get into that executive protection side of the world?
Yeah, so there's kind of a natural progression that occurred that was facilitated by being in Southern California. So the Marine Corps has a base called Camp Pendleton, and then I got a very weird duty called the Motion Picture Liaison, where you go into this office and you are essentially Hollywood's guide to teach people how to walk and talk like they're in the military, and each branch has their own. So the Department of Defense at the Pentagon says the script that Spielberg wrote or is producing, this script is good and we like it and we want to support it. Then they give it to me and say, hey, scrub this script. Don't say let's say cafeteria. We don't say cafeteria in the Marine Corps. We'd say chow hall. And don't say latrine. We say head. So you'd adjust that script and then you go out on set and you'd help them. You'd say, okay, this is how you wear your ribbons or badges or your medals. And this is how you align certain parts of the uniform. And this is how you walk. And this is how you salute. And so you train them on those kinds of things as a liaison to the industry. And the payback for the Department of Defense, and in my case, the Marine Corps, was that they would allow kind of for a recruiting tool, right? Because if kids see it like a Top Gun, right? For naval aviators, Top Gun was huge, but you start to see that kind of stuff and you're like, oh, I want to do that. That's cool. So it benefits both, the film industry and then also Department of Defense. So while I was out there, I was training at Hickson. So my coach came from Hickson's. As soon as I was out there, he's like, you're training with Hickson? Like, Roger that. I'm training with Hickson. So I trained at Hickson's. He had 2 or 3 iterations. So it went from like Pico to Palisades to Wilshire during the time that I was there. And while I was training there, I would meet people that were rich and famous. And I was a young Marine. I had no money. I had nothing. And these guys, because I had fought MMA at the time, because I was in the Marines and because I was a Spanish speaker, they were like, hey, we're going to Mexico. Can you come down with us and look after us, right? And it was initially a very loose thing, right? So you're setting up flights and hotels and you're navigating things and you're a translator, and you're making sure they don't go into certain areas and do certain things, and you're coordinating with local entities, whether it's governmental or private. And eventually what that built into was a security company. And eventually Guy Ritchie came into Hickson's to train, and he wanted to start training with me because I was an MMA guy. And he started dating Madonna. And as you know, that kind of fell apart. But during that time, I went to work for Madonna. And once you start getting a few big names on the resume, people want you to work for them. So our business is 100% word of mouth. I've never ever had a client come from a website or social media or a speaking engagement. They all come from, hey, who does so-and-so use? And like, oh, this is the guy. And that's true with executives. It's true with dignitaries. It's true with celebrities. So my company does probably 75% music tours and films on locations. And then the remainder are governmental and executives. And this will be our 25th year in business.
Wow. Well, were you able to do that while you were a Marine, or did that come after you left the Marine? So you're able to do both?
No. So I started it while I was in the Marine Corps. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps, they call it an EAS, end active service. I went straight to work for Madonna. So literally one day I'm in the Marine Corps, the next day I'm working for Madonna. And once that happened, it kind of took it a certain trajectory. So less, directors and executives going to foreign countries and more kind of entertainers and celebrities and stuff like that. But, we still do both, but that's the heavy focus is music tours and films on location.
I've heard you mention maybe one or two, including Madonna and Guy Ritchie. Is there anybody else that you're allowed to or okay mentioning that you've worked with or for?
Yeah. So with us, the way that it works is we have different NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and almost all of our governmental and almost all of our executives will have very strong NDAs. But oddly enough, with entertainment, they frequently put us out front. And that's not what we want, but that is how it works a lot of times. So they'll say your name, the company name, or, they'll produce or put out photos, or paparazzi will put out photos and you're with them. So it's not secret. It's not controlled in terms of NDAs. So we work with a lot, like your guys in terms of the jiu-jitsu space. I used to train Tommy Lee from Motley Crue in jiu-jitsu. Obviously your guys will know Maynard from Tool. Maynard's been a client for 24 years. So we train jiu-jitsu on the road and have taken mats on the road for 24 years. He just got his black belt this year. I think it was January. So a lot of different people, from the Janet Jacksons and Madonnas to bigger and better. So we go across the threshold in terms of like rock, pop, rap, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow. That's awesome, man. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the book. You want to tell everybody what the book is about? I'm sure you have a copy there. Do you have a copy there? You want to show it?
Of course I have a copy. I got a few copies.
Let's move some merch. Let's do it.
Those are different books, but the reason that I'm here and doing podcasts, at least right now, is to promote this book in particular. It's called Underpinning, right? Foundational Concepts in Force Instruction. And effectively what this book does is it focuses on guys that are teaching cops, military and law enforcement, who don't come from that background. So as you know, and I'm sure everybody watching knows, it's a big thing nowadays to train military and law enforcement in jiu-jitsu. And a large percentage of those guys don't actually have that background. So there's a ton of stuff that they don't understand about the realm. It doesn't mean that jiu-jitsu changes, but the space that the guys they're teaching operate in is completely different. And they have to operate under different rules and in different conditions. So this book goes through that. It talks about the laws that are associated with use of force. It talks about different aspects in terms of conditional aspects. So like if me and you are rolling gi or no gi, we essentially have very little clothing on and we're on a soft mat and it's probably somebody we know and there are rules to what you can and can't do. And the law doesn't really affect us so much when we're doing something like that, in a sporting kind of environment. And maybe some of the guys we're training are SWAT guys and they have 50 or 60 pounds of kit and they're operating in teams and they're operating on concrete and they're operating with guns and knives and all this kind of stuff. So it's a very different thing, and how you teach them has to be adjusted, much like if you're training somebody in MMA is different than training somebody in gi jiu-jitsu. So this book talks about all those aspects. So the idea is that it would give an average BJJ guy, whether they're a black belt first degree or they're a 10th degree red belt, it'll give them all the things they need to think about before they go to teach law enforcement. And, right now a hot subject is training law enforcement, trying to sell them packages with no law enforcement experience and trying to trademark, let's say, techniques that are very basic, like gift wrap. And so you got people. I know
what you're talking about, Todd. That was going to be my next question, is what you thought about the safe wrap system.
Listen,
I think that's what we're talking about, right?
If we're being honest, first of all, behooves a person, if they're going to sell something to an entity, to know that space, meaning they've done it themselves and they've done it in different conditions. If you have a person who is a professional MMA guy, that's going to help a little bit. If you have a person who is a military guy, that's going to help a little bit. A guy that served in law enforcement, that's going to help a little bit. But just jumping into a thing and trademarking it to make money, it doesn't make sense. You're not helping the community. You're charging a shit ton of money to do something that is common knowledge. Anybody knows it. You have blue belts that know the techniques. When you try to test it and you're testing against people who have no training, it's kind of worthless.
Unlock the power of your online presence with Black Belt Digital Marketing. Their reputation management program ensures your Google business profile is seen by more potential customers. Black Belt Digital Marketing is your full-service digital marketing agency specializing in local SEO and reputation management. Boost your business today. Visit bbdigitalmarketing.com. Your success is their priority.
Special thank you to the crew over at Flow and Roll for all their support. Flow and Roll is renowned for their incredible no-gi rash guards, shorts, and leggings. Flow and Roll has quickly become the premier custom apparel provider for academies big and small throughout the United States. Reach out today to discuss your custom order and ask about their incredible pre-order program. You can send an email to flowandroll@gmail.com or visit their Instagram at flow_n_roll and shoot them a direct message. And yes, they can create an awesome custom gi for your academy as well. Visit flowandroll.com to check out their awesome designs, and while you're there, pick up a Jiu-Jitsu Dummy signature tee exclusively at flowandroll.com. And remember, you'll get 20% off your purchase of t-shirts, rash guards, or gis with code JJD.
So there's a lot of things that occur in the law enforcement military space where a command staff is sold on an idea or somebody's name or somebody's family name, and it's not real. It's not the truth. It's not honest. It's not direct. And it doesn't come from a place of really trying to help the community. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal for Leos. And it's a massive point right now inside law enforcement circles, which a lot of these people teaching are not actually inside that. They may have students that are inside it, but they're not inside it. So it's a hot topic. It's something that should be looked at very closely. They're creating a lot of issues for a lot of guys. And there are other programs on the other side of it who are for free training law enforcement officers because they believe in the community. So you have these programs that are funding educations, right? Much like Academy Safe, where you're really working to achieve this safe environment for all people, and you're doing the homework for them. Other entities are doing that for law enforcement. And then, of course, you're always going to have the people that are in it for the money and the payday and the notoriety. But that's a hot topic. So this book covers those areas. So if you have anybody listening or watching that's a regular jiu-jitsu dude or MMA dude or Muay Thai dude or whatever they are, and they want to teach law enforcement or military, in particular law enforcement, it's important that they get these basic concepts down, because they're going to be doing a service for themselves, for the officer, for the agency, for the community. And it's a big deal. There's a lot to learn. You cannot just assume that you know something about a realm you've never been around or in studied. Much like jiu-jitsu, just because I did soccer doesn't make me a jiu-jitsu black belt. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't translate.
Did the book come from a place of frustration in what you were seeing?
Yeah, I mean, if we're being honest, I'm watching guys teach things that would get cops put in prison and saying, no, it doesn't work that way, or something that's totally unrealistic, something that is based on mats or cages or control. And we don't have that same thing in those environments. They're very different. You're fighting with a lot of kit. You're fighting in teams. You're fighting with a massive amount of scrutiny, right? People are constantly looking at it and going through it with a fine-tooth comb. And I think you can't know it unless you're in it or around it or have spent some amount of time in it. If you look at this book, it goes through psychological components, it goes through legal components, it goes through agency-specific components. I don't know how well this will kind of come through, but
Yeah, we can see it.
when you look at this stuff, these are all systems and processes and ideas. And I'm not making money on the book. It's $20. At the end of the day, I'm going to get a couple bucks from the book. It's really more of a way to have people look at things through a realistic lens, as opposed to through a money-making lens or through sport competitive lens, right? So, I love jujitsu. Obviously, if I've been training jujitsu for 30 years, I love jujitsu, and I haven't stopped. I haven't stopped competing. So, it's important though that I disconnect from my personal passion regarding jujitsu and say that if we go from mats to concrete, and if we go from our friend to a person that wants to kill us, and if I go from having a gi or no gi on to having 40 or 50 pounds of gear, and if I go from a very tight rule set to no rules, and if I add guns and knives in, and if I add 2 or 3 or 4 people into it, it's different. It changes. And so this book discusses those factors. And mindset wise, you have to think about it. And when you think about it in terms of, time, location, method of attack, and response. And when you look at those factors, the bad guy picks the time, they pick the place, and they pick the method of attack, and the cop is picking the response. Mm-hmm. What is faster? Is action faster or is reaction faster? So they're always going to be behind the power curve. And if I put a rear naked choke on you and I start squeezing and I go, now defend, it's going to be a lot harder for you to defend that than it is if you say, hey, I'm going to come after you and now I'm going to apply a rear naked choke. It's different. And so I think it's important for people to understand that even if they don't teach Leos or military, it's a good book to read through to understand what happens. We also get into data and statistics relative to how frequent things are. There's a lot of misinformation and maybe even disinformation with regard to how frequent certain encounters are. So that's kind of my main purpose of talking to you today, is just to put information out about the book. Guys can get it on our website, tourprotection.com. Guys can get it on Amazon or Apple or Barnes & Noble or any of those major platforms. So it's my 5th book, and it's a passion. Like you said, it likely comes from, even though that wasn't the design, it likely comes from frustration, right? Seeing things happen a certain way and then knowing at the end of the day, the person that suffers most is the guy that's going to have to protect the community, not the guy that got the paycheck to come in and show them something that they don't become proficient at.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. When I look at the questions that I have specifically, I mean, I'll say it. You don't have to say it. Like the safe rap side of things. I mean, we're talking about Henner and Huron with their new system. And I get one of the questions, or one of the things that I haven't seen is, typically when they're demonstrating, it's always two people on one perpetrator, right? It's in that case, right, they're teaching LEOs. So it's always showing the 2-on-1 situation. I don't know how far they go. I haven't seen it in the videos that I'm looking at on their Instagrams or when it comes in my feed, but it's never I haven't seen it 1-on-1 without somebody else holding the feet, right? And I haven't seen it when, what are you doing, like with the crowd control, or you're holding one guy down, but he's got a friend that's engaging the guy that's holding the legs. Like, I hope that they get into that side of things. I haven't seen it in the videos. They're only showing it, okay, 2-on-1 now. Hey, go ahead, try to get out. Look, you can't get out, which I still think is good. It's a good thing. We're getting jiu-jitsu through the doors, and I kind of almost think, if we can get it through the doors and then we can perfect it, then we're getting to a better place. But that's the one question I have, is I don't know, in those training sessions, are they breaking it down with, you got a weapon, you've got a knife, there's a friend with a gun or a knife. How are you handling these other situations? And I just haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. I mean, if we just go back to kind of your first point, which is, how do you function within your agency, right? How many agencies have 2-man patrols, right? If you have 2 men to a patrol, let's say you're in LAPD or you're in NYPD, or you're in one of these massive cities, the vast majority of the country is made up of small agencies, small to mid-sized agencies. And the vast majority of the country, it's one person, right? And so whether you're talking about a rural environment, like maybe a state agency, like a highway patrol, maybe they're covering geographically this massive land space or mass. And then you've got another cop who's inner city, who has a backup maybe 30 seconds away or 2 minutes away. But very few people are operating in these large numbers with large teams with quick response times. That's a handful of agencies, right? And when you look at agencies that buy into it, they tend to be agencies that have a lot of money, right? So who are you really helping? And this is a big deal. And also, to your point, I do believe that it's better to know basic sport jiu-jitsu than nothing at all. That's a fact. But you can't learn jiu-jitsu in one 4-hour seminar. You can't learn it in one 8-hour seminar. You can't learn it in 16 hours, right? It's not real. You have to do it repeatedly. You have to be super consistent, and you have to understand the fundamentals and the basics, and you have to understand how all these components change it, right? So what happens? Like, let's talk about simple stuff. If I'm doing takedowns, I love trips, inside trip, outside trip. I love all kinds of trips. Some of them are problematic when I'm going to concrete because it drives my knee into the ground. So if that's the takedown I'm doing, I have to know before I hit the ground how to break that movement, that energy, that flow, and where do I put that weight or energy at? So that's something I need to think about. If I am training with no gi and then I wear this big, heavy vest with all kinds of stuff on it, I have to know people can grab that and hold on to that and latch onto that. It can be a weapon. It can be a body cam. It can be a taser. It can be OC spray. It can be cuffs. It can be anything. There are these leashes that they can get a hold of. How do I deal with that when I don't learn that in jiu-jitsu? Also, another thing, fighting wise, when you're on the ground, in addition to the surface space, in addition to proximity where weapons are very close to the bad guy, you lose your elevation, which means you lose your sight lines. You cannot see over cars or through windows or around stuff, which means you can't see when the bad guy's friends are showing up to kick you in the head. So there are a lot of reasons why doing what I love to do, which is jiu-jitsu, is not ideal. And the reason to learn it is in case you end up there, but that's not the place that you're trying to take it because of all the negative components that are involved from a law enforcement capacity, right? I think a lot of guys in my spot will argue the opposite way because they love jiu-jitsu, but we have to be real too. I love jiu-jitsu. I love Muay Thai. I love MMA, but I can't act like those are the panacea and those are going to cure everything related to law enforcement use of force in America. It's not.
Yeah. You said it, and I was about to say it. I don't think of the law enforcement officers that we've had on that anybody said that it's not ideal. It's not ideal to bring them to the ground. Is right what you're saying, right? Two guys could cuff a guy against a wall. You don't have to take him to the ground.
No, look, this is the thing. You're going to have contact because if you're going to arrest somebody, you're going to have physical contact. You can't do something at a distance. It doesn't work that way, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to start at a distance. It's eventually going to get close. If you're going to cuff them, you have to touch them. So when you think about it, just in very simple terms, we talked about surface space. It hurts. Not you, not me. Nobody I know wants to do takedown drills on concrete, right? So we know that. We're probably going to be in close proximity to a wall or a wheel or a window. Those things hurt too. I don't know if you've experienced those, but going through a window sucks.
No.
Shoved into a wheel sucks. Going into a car, it sucks. Fighting on ice, it sucks. Fighting on rocks, it sucks. Why is it that no martial arts school has these things to train on? Because it sucks and it's not real, right? So martial arts are great, and they're great for the mindset, and they're great for physical fitness and sport and all this stuff. And even components of each of the combat sports, meaning wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, and Jiu-Jitsu, are great to translate out into the real world, so long as you make modifications for the realm that you're in. So I don't want to be on the ground, one, because of the service space. Two, I don't want to give proximity for my weapons to the bad guy, where I've got to now deal with weapon retention techniques, which are not in most jiu-jitsu curriculums. Another thing is I don't want to lose that sight line that I would have otherwise. Another thing is that I'm going to tire much quicker wrestling, grappling with somebody on the ground than I am standing on my feet, only because every day, all day long, I'm on my feet, I'm walking, I'm moving. My legs are used to that, right? So there are a lot of reasons not to be there, in addition to the gear they wear, in addition to the laws they have to abide by, in addition to all of the lost factors in terms of control. So people don't want to talk about that, I think, because they're so passionate about jiu-jitsu. I match the passion, but I also bring some reality to the conversation.
So I have a comment and a question. So a comment, you said, have I ever been thrown through a window? No, but I know plenty of people that probably want to throw me through a window. The question was going to be, so I want to make sure that we address this and we say it, because we didn't. We talked about your background. We talked about you training the Marines. but we didn't talk about specific law enforcement experience. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So in my case, I needed to have a law enforcement commission to do a very specific job. And so I went through a state agency. So let's say it's like a 6-month academy where you go through to get a commission. And then essentially you go to an agency. So it could be local, state, federal, and they commission you. And then you work for them. So you have to go through what's called FTO, field training. And then after you do that, they put you on a probationary status. And then in my case, because of my background, I stood up what's called an SRT, or a special response team. And then I ran defensive tactics, and I worked on counter-narcotics. And because I had these backgrounds already coming in, and so they allowed me to kind of transition quickly. So I had limited street time, but I was in a very, very rough area, and we dealt with different entities, and we had even problems like Ferguson that occurred, riots. So my team got put to use until it became not socially acceptable to do so. So my background was there. And then from that time to present, I've stayed engaged, and I've kept my commission, and I've kept teaching and training law enforcement. I believe in the mission. I believe on protecting the community. If I'm overseas doing security work, somebody's got to be home to protect the home front. And so the first line is law enforcement. So, my time there continues, but in a different capacity, and in a reserve status versus a full-time guy.
Okay. Let me get your feelings on I believe, is it called just basically the diaphragm law, New York's diaphragm law? And do you discuss that? Or, basically, they've really kind of, when you sit down and look at it, they've taken so many tools away. You can't choke. You can't sit on somebody. You can't, again, basically hold their diaphragm down so that they can't breathe. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you discuss it at all in your book, or do you address anything like that?
Yes. Not that specific one, but I'll explain to you. So the first thing is to understand the Constitution, right? And start to understand what a seizure of a person is. So when you take control of a person, it's a seizure. When you shoot or kill a person, it's a seizure of their person, of their life. You have to understand the law, and then you have to understand the case law that guides law enforcement with respect to use of force. So there are a number of them, but the primary one, right, is called Graham versus Connor, right? And essentially what it says is that your actions have to be objectively reasonable based on the totality of the circumstances, and they can't be judged in hindsight. And what it looks at, right, is the severity of the crime. It looks at the immediacy of the threat, right? Is that something that you could have dealt with, or kind of slowly dealt with, or is it an immediate threat? And it looks at certain factors that would contribute or take away from the validity of your action. So this book addresses those things. It looks into why and how, and it looks into the physical aspects. But one thing that I think that people don't understand, in addition to the Constitution, in addition to case law, in addition to things like state statutes that will define what certain things are and what you can and can't do, and then you have agency policy, which is not law, but it's let's say, whatever law enforcement agency you work for will have a specific policy to use of force, saying you can do these things and not these things. And it can be more restrictive than law. When you look at some agencies like NYPD, they are much more restrictive in their policies. Now, they can also push forward the law so that the law matches that, and there's parity between the law and the agency policy. So we get into that. We get into it in broad strokes because I would have to change it for every single state. Generally speaking, when you look at it, the more liberal a state is, they tend to have much more restriction on the law with respect to use of force. The more conservative they are, they tend to be much more open with respect to what can happen and how it can happen. And is it just simply objectively reasonable based on the totality of the circumstances, right? Severity of the crime, immediacy of the threat, the level of resistance faced, and if, the offender was fleeing. So those are the key factors. I address that. We get into Tennessee versus Gardner, Scott versus Henrich, some of the cases and the percentages and why it works or doesn't work. But one thing for people to know is that this is constantly changing, and it's changing state to state, and it's changing in the US, and case law evolves. So you have to stay on top of that. And positional asphyxia is a hot topic right now. And a case just came out on that in May that discusses that, May of this year. So these guys, I think, are getting into some space that it's kind of a bad spot to be when you don't understand all of the factors. Even if you say you do, even if you're training guys that do something and the guys give you some information, it's very different to do something. I can go to the UFC and watch a fight. It doesn't make me UFC heavyweight champion, right? There's a major difference between me and that UFC heavyweight champion.
What advice would you give people that are for people that are not LEOs, have no background, that are trying to teach in that space? How could they do it better? How could they do it right? What would make it more appealing, or what would make you feel more comfortable with what they're teaching? How do they proceed?
Well, first they have to understand those factors. So this book specifically addresses that. Now, you don't have to buy the book, no problem, but go out and learn the specific factors. You guys can find the table of contents that I held up. Just go research what's in the table of contents. You don't need to buy my book or support me or even what I'm saying. But if you look at those factors, meaning you learn the laws related to use of force, you understand how the Constitution works, go out and read literally the policy regarding use of force for the state statute, one, and that's the law, and the policy for the agency. So those will all be different. Learn that, and then go out and see how, let's say, a school resource officer functions, see how a patrol officer functions, see how some type of tactical element functions, and start seeing what works and doesn't work, and then question what you're doing. Like we were talking about, and I'll just go back to what we discussed, which is, do you want to do takedowns on concrete? Okay, you say no. Well, do officers walk around on soft mats? Do officers walk around in gis or no gi clothing? Do officers have the ability to not fight people with guns or knives? You just need to have some type of parity with reality. And so it takes time and energy, and you have to disconnect from whatever your personal belief is relative to that system and go out and find the truth.
Have you worked with any, I've interviewed a few EFC, Effective Fitness Combatives. I've had Brennan from BJJ Cops on. I went to one of his seminars when he was in South Florida. There's the Zen Gorilla, who I believe he's part owner of Henzo Gracie Austin, where Danaher and Gordon have kind of set up shop. At least they train there part-time still. Is there anybody that you work with, or anybody you kind of feel like, yeah, if Jiu-Jitsu 5.0, I've had him on, and every one of those are former, or I guess me at the time I interviewed them, they might have been active, but they've all been former law enforcement officers who are training people. Is there anybody that you've worked with that you'd be like, yeah, this guy, I know what they're doing, I've worked with them, or I know what they're doing and they're doing it right?
No, listen, I know who those guys are, right? And I've talked to some of those guys, and we've done seminars at the same places, and we've worked with associations together. I think at the end of the day, you're going to get a much more realistic look from them. I don't think everybody's the same. I don't think they're all top tier. But I think with all of the groups that you mentioned, they have that background, they have the understanding, they have the knowledge. And I think that's a big deal. That's important. So, if guys go through their curriculums, maybe it gives an average jiu-jitsu guy just a different look. And again, I'm not selling to individuals, I'm selling to agencies. I just don't do it full time. Those guys are pretty much full time selling training. 99% of my time is focused on executive protection work overseas. But I would say that those guys are going to be leaps and bounds ahead in terms of training Leos versus a straight jiu-jitsu guy. That's the truth.
Okay. So let's talk about that. You said, a lot of your stuff is overseas. I mean, what does the average week look like for you? Are you like jumping on planes, or are you sending people out? Or, are you at the top of the heap here and you're sending guys out? Okay, listen, we need to go do this, pick this person up, get this person out of a situation, or they're doing a concert overseas. I mean, all the above. Is that what?
All of the above. Because when you own a business, everything is your responsibility. Sure. And in my case, no matter how many guys I have or what's going on, you're still going to get people that are used to working with you and around you. And so they see you as the leader in that field, and they want you present, right? So let's say you're the black belt that owns the gym, and that's me. And I say, you know what, I'm going to give you this purple belt. He's really good. He's competitive. He's a good teacher. He's articulate. his style is similar to yours, his body type similar to yours, you're going to have a good time. And many clients are going to say, no, I don't want that purple belt. I want you, So we deal with that. So we're, I talked to you right now. We're dealing this morning with a client who's getting ready to go to South Africa, and we're dealing with armored vehicles. We're dealing with local armed security. We're dealing with private flights getting in and out. We're dealing with hotel security. We're dealing with the regional security officer at the U.S. Embassy, and we're making sure all those things are interlocked together so that we're able to adjust and manipulate certain variables in the equation to get the outcome we're looking for. At the same time, just had another client announce that they're doing a South American tour, and now we're dealing with that aspect. So we're getting stuff in place for us to send a couple guys down to do what are called site surveys. They go in and they do advanced work. So they'll visit all those places. They'll visit the private airport. They'll visit the hotel. They'll visit a trauma level 1 hospital. They'll visit local police, local fire. They'll come up with safe havens. Maybe they come up with what their stash car is going to be and where that stash car is going to be located, where are rally points. So they go in there and they develop all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And normally at any given time, we have half a dozen different operations going. Then we have another governmental aspect coming. We're lending some support as a third party to a governmental operation. And then at the same time now, this weekend starts what's called NTOA conference. So it's a National Tactical Officers Association. Their conference is in Kansas City. So now I'm heading to KC for this. Week after is Combative Summit. The week after that, I'm running a state defensive tactics program, and then I'm overseas for 6 weeks. So it's constant, and I'm juggling guys. I'm juggling funding. I'm juggling, these different realms, meaning my personal training, Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, my training of law enforcement or governmental bodies, my oversight of my team, my own guys that are working for my company, and then obviously supporting my clients. So it's a cluster. We got a lot of movement, a lot of activity, and it's been that way for 25 years. I don't think it's ever stopped.
Wow. Well, I hope I can ask this personal question. And a big part of what we do is getting to know, like, not only people inside of the jiu-jitsu world, but their life around it. Are you married? Do you have kids?
Yeah. So one of the things with the marriage while you're gone is very difficult. It's constant finding these little moments of time, right? Like, if I'm out and I'm overseas and I'm dealing with whatever issue, and I know, let's say I got 2 hours until this entity arrives at the airport and I've done all the advancing, and now I go to what they call the FBO, the fixed base operator, a private airport, and I'm sitting there waiting for a client because we have to be there early. And I've got 90 minutes. I'm going to make a call and I'm going to have that conversation with the family. Hey, what's going on? How you doing? It's a FaceTime phone call now, which is very different than it was when I started, right? We didn't have things like FaceTime and iPhones and stuff like that. So it's getting a little bit better, but that is also, as you are alluding to, a full-time job in and of itself, right? So when you are off, are you able to disconnect from all of the things going on and then connect with your family? So that's probably the biggest challenge, I think, for most people that I know in my field and for my company, me as well.
Yeah. I didn't notice it earlier, but now I see your kind of hand came into frame and you had the wedding ring on there. So I guess that would have answered my question as well.
Yeah, it's good insight from your perspective, because trying to do all these things, and to give you a general idea, I would say our average workday is 18 hours. And with many clients, it's either 6 or 7 days a week, depending on how big the team is. If the team's big, you might get a day off. But if the team's small, it's you, and it's you 24/7. And that means you're up before the client and you go to bed after the client, and you have a ton of admin and logistics that you're dealing with in addition to physically being present. So you have to plan and coordinate and communicate and do all these things before they happen. And then you have to be there when they're happening and direct them. And you have to deal with the aftermath of what happened, good or bad, and deal with, after action reviews and communication and maintaining relationships with different entities. It can be state level entities. When I say state, I mean foreign state entities, where I need to make sure that certain people get taken care of. If they don't get taken care of, they can ruin our day. They can ruin our lives. They can imprison us. So we're going to third world countries and things don't function the same way they do here. And I have to know that in advance, because if I try to operate like I would in the US in certain parts of South America or Africa, not only can I be in prison, but I can be killed pretty easily, and so can my client. And the primary objective is to keep them safe. So part of that is doing the research, knowing the people, knowing the culture, understanding how things function, and then acclimating to it. And like for me personally, I'm not a fan of bribes or paying people off or any of that kind of stuff. So I grew up a certain way. That's not acceptable. And in American culture, as a general rule, that's not acceptable. But when you go to some of these places, if you don't pay them, things aren't going to happen that you want to happen, and bad things will happen. So, we introduced something called, and this is a U.S. government term, a facilitation fee, right? Where we're able to pay them to make something happen. So, that's all of that stuff is really important in what we do and understanding how we do it, and us adapting to the environment, much like the law enforcement thing. Like I need to adapt my jiu-jitsu to law enforcement. When I'm going to a foreign country and I'm protecting somebody, I need to adapt how I think, how I look at it, how I solve problems to that region.
Have you ever, obviously I understand NDAs, believe me, but have you ever been in a situation where things went really haywire, obviously without mentioning any names? Have you ever had anything go really completely sideways?
Yeah. And a lot of times it's related to something a client does, making bad decisions on the front end. And then when it goes bad because of the decision they made, they look at us like, hey, you solved this. Even though they created it, I can't say, well, you created this. So yes, it happens. And sometimes, we get lucky, and sometimes we get out by a hair. But missed by an inch, missed by a mile, we get out. And we've been lucky. We've had some less than ideal circumstances that could have gone very bad. And through prior planning on our part and through relationship building that we've had in certain foreign countries, in particular with the U.S. government, but also with the host nation at a very high level, they've been able to help us out of some nasty, violent circumstances.
I've got to imagine when you're dealing with famous people, social media has got to be the enemy. It's like they just one post and
Yes.
now everybody knows where you are and what hotel you're staying in, or, what the
Yes.
car that you're driving. Or again, you guys, they recognize, those are the bodyguards, right? I've got to believe that that's a nightmare to deal with.
Yeah. So you're onto something there. A lot of the things that you said demonstrate insight on how you're seeing things, because it's very realistic. So normally we're fighting against different elements. So the client always produces some challenge for us. But one of the things when you talk about celebrities is they have publicists. So the publicist's job is to get them attention, to draw the media to them, to show the fans what they're doing. And that's in stark contrast to security, because we would like to have them enclosed in a box and locked up and have security around them and not have anybody know what's going on. We compartmentalize information for that reason. But no matter what we do, people are letting the cat out of the bag. So like you noted, let's say a private flight's coming in, and the local national handler for that particular flight is then telling his cousin, and then they tell the fan club, and then all of a sudden everybody shows up. Or the same thing at the hotel. And paparazzi are not stupid. They know where to go. They know where certain high profile people stay at. Like, oh, we're going to the Four Seasons in this city, or we're going to the Ritz-Carlton in that city, or the Mandarin Oriental in that city. So it's not super hard to find them. But then when the artist goes and does a dance on their balcony, now they've narrowed it down, not the hotel, but the room that they're in. Oh, wow. And, we have paparazzi who are buying condominiums or, entities that are close by key hotels, and they literally own directly across from a penthouse suite that condo in that city. And so they're set up. Their shop is completely set up. Some of them will have things like infrared. Some of the entities will have fixed cameras set up. Some will have video cameras set up on the outside of buildings. And that's problematic in terms of personal information going out. But the other thing is that it makes it harder for us, because now we're not trying to go out the front door. We're trying to go out either underground, if that's an option, trying to go out through a service area, maybe an elevated position if we have that. It changes how we do stuff, how we move. And like you noted, the vehicles, if they start to be able to identify vehicles, then we have to do things like running decoys, where we're sending those vehicles out. And then, let's say our pop star, she goes out in a 15-passenger van that just looks like a group of tourists, right? And we've loaded her up in a loading dock or something like that. So yes, that's a constant with entertainers. Thankfully, with executives, most people don't know who they are, one, and two, they control information very well and they're organized in structure, which is really the big difference, right? We have one entity that's super structured and another one that's like all about chaos and emotion and that. And so that changes the game for us.
So I have a client. I run Black Belt Digital Marketing. I've had a client they've been with me for a really long time, well over a decade. They're Best Trails in Travel up in New York City. And we handle their social media. This was probably going on 5 years ago, before this new Taylor Swift Eras concert. But Taylor Swift flew into New York. This bus went to pick up her and everybody that was on the plane. It was a private plane, got her name on the side of it. And within just a couple of minutes, the plane kind of comes into view. They take a picture of the bus with the plane in the background. The driver sent it to the company sent it to us, and within just a few minutes of them landing, we had it up on the social media, and we hashtagged it with like Taylor Swift. It says Taylor Swift on the side of the plane. We have it up in 5 minutes, and within like 10 minutes after that, we get a phone call. You got to take that down right now. You have to take that down right now. And we're like, what's going on? Like Taylor Swift people just called us and told us we need to take that down immediately. And we're like, holy shit. So a little taste from the outside of like, oh shit, what did we do? Or, again, it's got says freaking Taylor Swift on the side of the plane. People are going to see this, but I guess we weren't helping with people with people immediately knowing where she was.
Yeah. People try to control, at least in our business from a security perspective, try to control the variables that you can control. And one of those things is like with Flight Tracker and Flight Aware, you can turn off the tracking off the tail number. So if you see, a plane with Taylor Swift on it and you look at the tail number, you can start to track her movements, unless in advance when they file the flight plan, they remove that tail number. So you can't see when and where she's going and how long she's there and all that kind of stuff. So we try to figure out ways around it, but obviously we're realistic. We know that certain people are going to show up and certain things are going to happen. And also, if we're very blunt, we know that attention, that fame is what brings us to the table, right? So if we don't let them do that, the job will eventually go away if they're not famous anymore. So part of that is interacting, let's say with paparazzi. And I'm going to go out there and say, hey, I want you to keep this distance. If you don't, I'm going to block your shot. I'm going to be in every shot. No one wants a photo of me. So they're not going to get the pop star. They're like, okay, well, we'll play the game. Like, hey, no up shots. Because let's say my main concern is she's wearing a dress or a skirt and she's getting in the car. She has to step. And then certain pop will know they can get that up shot of the skirt. And that will sell to certain magazines. So we can make agreements with those guys and talk to those guys. And the thing about it is we're going to come back and see those same guys, right? So let's say it's TMZ and it's the same group of characters. Every time I go to LX, I know I'm going to see them. So I'm going to see them with Pop Star 1, Pop Star 2, Pop Star 3, Pop Star 4, Pop Star 5. It's better. I don't need to be friends. And in fact, I don't want to be friends with them because I have a very different job. But I do want to have the ability to communicate with them to control those variables if they're going to be there. If I can't remove them, if I can't stop the contact or interaction because it's a public space, then I try to control the structure that surrounds them. So it's a conversation and asking certain things and maybe giving certain things, right? It could be me giving a guitar pick. It could be me giving a challenge coin. It could be me giving a concert t-shirt. It could be whatever. If some of the artists are good with certain things, and it could be me saying, hey, I'll get a group shot of the artist with all the paparazzi if you do these things. So you have to structure it. There's no way around it anymore. And trying to fight them doesn't work. What that does is gets them sued. And when I say them sued, I mean the artist. Because let's say a guy like me, relative to the artist, I'm poor. So they're not going to come after me. They're going to come after the artist and say, this guy was an agent acting on your behalf. So there are a lot of variables, you're hitting on some of them, but they're constant and they're slightly different with each artist, but they're always present.
Okay. So now I have one fanboy question, and I think this one's okay because I saw it publicly. I saw it on your feed. I see you had a picture in Joe Rogan's studio. Mm-hmm. Were you there providing protection for a guest or?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So we're there pretty consistently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of big artists will go there, and some are artists that we've had 20, 30 year relationships, some 5 or 6 years. Joe's got an amazing studio and some great guys. I'm obviously friends with his security guys. And then, they have a great weight training facility and jiu-jitsu gym. And some of our clients have actually trained there at that location. So it's a cool spot. It's an interesting spot. Joe's always treated us, all of our guys, very well, very respectful. Needless to say, he comes to a lot of concerts for a lot of our clients. So there's consistent interaction, and I get along good with his guys, and I get along good with him.
Very cool. All right, so we're going to start to wrap it up, and I mentioned to you we're going to do something that we call
The Drill Down.
We actually have a sound effect that's going to go in place there when we actually air this. So it's my producer yelling the drill down. So we're going to go through. These are some of the most commonly asked questions that we get. So because a lot of times we'll get questions from the public, and then we'll send them a coffee mug or a T-shirt if we actually use their question. So these are kind of like the basics that everybody gives us. So I just like to ask every guest, and we get them out of the way. So we're going to start at the top. Preference, gi or no gi?
Man, that's hard. I'm a 50-50 guy. As I get older, I think I shift more toward gi.
Okay. Takedown or pull guard?
I would always try the takedown. Pulling guard typically for me is with bigger guys.
And I should say too, we didn't get to talk about this. I know we want to get you out of here in the next 15 minutes, but did I hear that you still compete? I think I heard you on a podcast talking about that. You still compete?
Yeah,
so you're still competing in like IBJJFs or local tournaments?
Yep.
Yes.
All that stuff. Yeah, all that stuff. So I'm still doing IBJJFs on a semi-regular basis 2 or 3 times a year. Still doing, AGF, still doing NAGA, all of them. It's cool because when I came up, we didn't have access to that. Like we'd have these random rare tournaments. So now for me, it's great because I can be traveling around the world and then be like, hey, I got 3 weeks to train. There's a tournament there. Boom, I'm in.
Okay. And I didn't get to ask you this, and I want to make sure that when we put out the podcast that we put the information correctly. Are you a multi-degree black belt?
I'm a 4th degree black belt.
4th degree black belt. Okay. I think I don't know that we put that on your questions post, and I'll make sure I get it right when we put this out.
Coveted pieces of tape.
Yeah, right. Well, now they're getting fancy, right? You can get the belt and you can get them like sewn on now. Like now it's all super fancy. I'm seeing like the belt ceremonies, like they're bringing a new belt with like the degrees on there. So now this replaces the previous belt.
That's super cool. But I'm going to show you some just so you know.
You got some gray, unstitched belt, I bet, right? Like, is it? Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go.
It's just tape.
Just
tape. I came up this way, and I'll change the tape out when it gets crusty. I'll change the tape out, but I don't know. It's kind of a very visceral thing. It's a real thing. It's a cool thing. I have belts that have been given ceremonial belts.
Yeah.
But I'm still a medical white tape that gets strapped on.
I'm down with that. People cool. Like we'll talk about. We're gonna come back to that in a second, but let me go through these other questions here. So, music during rolling, yes or no?
My school is a no school. I am a yes person.
Really? Okay. So in your gym there, you're gonna throw on some music.
So like in my gym behind me, there's always music playing. I'm a music guy. In my gym, at Rodrigo Vaghi's gym, they don't play music unless he's gone, maybe, and the guys are rolling. But, so officially, no. But if you ask me personally, I'm absolutely a fan of music while rolling.
What's the go-to? What's your preference?
Man, I listen to Latin music. So I see that tattoo under your arm. So I listen to salsa, merengue, cumbia, bachata. Yeah.
Are you, what's your background? Are you Hispanic?
No. I'm a white boy. I'm a white boy, as you can see with my red
Well,
cheeks.
I was going to say, don't let that fool you. I live in South Florida, man. It's like blonde hair, blue eyes. You could be anywhere from South America here. I mean, this is the gateway, right? So one of the reasons I tell the story, I grew up on Long Island, and no matter what you were on Long Island, you were Puerto Rican, right? It didn't matter what Hispanic background. So, right, there's Puerto Rican. Down here in Florida, it's no matter what you are, you're Cuban. Texas and Cali, it's you're Mexican, right? So you get that. But, as someone, all my life, every year we went to, when I was growing up, we always went to PR, see my grandmother and stuff like that. And it's just like here. There's different color people, there are black Hispanics, there are white Hispanics. And, my mom, very light skinned, they look more like the Taino Indians, they would say, like that look, and more of a native to that island, at least native look. That was like my mom's side of the family. So like growing up, I'm darker than this in the summer in New York, and you see my white mom, and no one ever thought it was my mom. So my point is that, I always knew that there were blonde hair, blue eyed Puerto Ricans and black Puerto Ricans, but, people don't see that. They just thought, this is Puerto Rican, right? So when I moved to Florida, I felt so comfortable. I was online at the supermarket, and this blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman was yelling at her two blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids on the line in checkout in Spanish. And I'm like, I'm home. I love this. I just love that mix. And I understood that mix. And I had seen that mix every time I went to PR, but I didn't live in that mix in New York. At least it wasn't very evident. So one of the reasons I fell in love with South Florida is that diversity of even just the Hispanic backgrounds, the Latin backgrounds.
You look at me, and no matter where I'm at in South Florida, like, hey, está para acá. Like, ¿qué está haciendo él? And like, literally talking to me. They don't know I speak Spanish, and they're having like, how is it that you?
But
assume
that's
that's the assumption. It's Spanish first, English second.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool like that. It's a nice cultural change.
So that's the music that you're playing in the studio when you're rolling?
So normally for me it's Latin. So if you talk to anybody that trains with me and I'm controlling the music, you're probably going to hear some type of Latin music. It could be salsa, merengue, cumbia, bachata, whatever. It could be peso pluma. So it typically for me is that's the rhythm, that's the flow, that's kind of what I like. I feel good training. I think at the gym, it depends on who's running it, but like I'll hear two things frequently. I'll hear hip hop frequently. Usually that's the striking guys. And then, of course, now with jiu-jitsu, it's not my thing, but it's a common thing. A lot of guys smoke a lot of weed, and you see like they're putting Marley on and stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
I love it all. Yes to everything you said. I'll listen to country. I'll listen to Spanish music. I'll listen to just about anything. I like it all. It's every single one of those genres are on my phone and what I listen to in the car. If I'm controlling the music myself, though, man, I would honestly, I'd be like, let me plug in my phone and just put it on. One song is going to be a country love song, and the next one's going to be freaking Cypress Hill, something crazy like that. So, but I love it like that too, because I think it makes it, when there is a mix or it gets to be fun. Like in that moment of rolling, when the music is on, that's when like you really kind of let go a little bit, and you kind of just have fun with it. I don't think I've ever been in a gym where music wasn't absolutely part of like time to roll, throw the music on, let's go and let's do it, So your gym with no music, I don't know how that's got to be like.
It's old school, man. It's just like guys, my gym, for example, it used to be only white gis, and then it was only white and blue. And it's like, hey, IBJJF now allows black gis. Like, oh no, we're not doing black gis. So it's just some people are very slow to adjust and change with the times. They're conservative in their approach to kind of that cultural, social situation there, because they came up a certain way and that's the way they need to do it. So I don't try to fight that. When I'm doing my own thing, I do it my way. When I'm in someone else's space, I do it their way. Just like being in a different country, or, it's the same thing. I have to adapt to that environment, and I do it. But if I get to pick and choose, man, you're probably going to hear me listen to reggaeton, with these guys back here behind me.
Let me just say this one other thing. I know that at my last school, whenever music wasn't played, it almost felt like we were being punished. Like the coach isn't happy, something's wrong. Like it was almost like you're a kid being sent to your room. It's just like, it was more of like, we're having a workout today, he's going to really work us, versus like when the music comes on, then you just know it can be a little bit more fun. But I'm a talk, obviously, like who would have guessed, I talk while I'm rolling. I love to joke around and talk, and whether I'm losing or I'm handing out a beating, I love to talk, narrate the roll, fuck with somebody, mess with them a little bit, kind of throw them off their game a little bit, especially if they're beating me up. So when the music isn't on, I can't do that. The coach would be like, hey, what are you doing? Save it for Facebook, he used to say. You want to talk? Save it for Facebook. What are you doing? So
that's the kind of stuff that my coach would say too.
So let me we'll move on to the next question. So what would you be doing if you hadn't have found martial arts? And I know, that so closely ties to your service, but what if you hadn't have found martial arts and maybe you weren't a Marine? Was there something that you grew up wanting to do, or was this it?
No. So the thing is, I like to travel, and I like different cultures and different languages and different foods. And so, I come from the Midwest. It's really whitewashed, and I love where I'm from, and I love the country I'm from, and I love the people that are around me. And I came back to it after I had left for many years. But it's so hard to disconnect from like Marine Corps, SWAT teams, fighting, security. All that stuff is interlinked. But if I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu, it would probably be some other fitness-based thing, right? Because sports make me feel good, right? Physically fit, keep kind of in the weight class that you're in. I'm barely bigger than I was in high school. And so I can't imagine not having some type of daily activity whether it's like a CrossFit type thing or playing tennis or like whatever it may be. I definitely would go down that path for sure. But if I wasn't doing the job that I'm doing, I would probably be in some type of industry that relates to travel and culture.
Okay. So I have two more questions for you. What is your ultimate goal? I usually say in jiu-jitsu, but for you, I'm going to change that to what would you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to remember about you with everything that you've done within the scope of what you're doing with martial arts and being a veteran and things like that? What do you want people to remember?
Yeah. Well, let me hit the first part and then we'll hit the second part. For me personally, I'm working to simplify my game. And I know this sounds crazy. Like a lot of guys are looking to add more. I'm looking to find things that apply in more situations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can have less moves to solve more problems, right? That's my goal personally for me. As I get older, I'm going to get slower. I'm probably going to get a little bit fatter. Neurons are not going to fire quite the same way. So my reaction time is going to be a little bit slower too. So I'm working to reduce the number of techniques down, but make sure the techniques are efficient and effective. So that's what I'm doing on a personal. And then in terms of like legacy, I try to work with guys relative to their skill sets and their abilities and their design and their mindset. And what I mean is, I don't believe that one size fits all. I absolutely, positively do not agree with that. Whether it's law enforcement or military or just a tournament jiu-jitsu or MMA, we have pros and cons, right? So when I'm training guys, I'm looking at certain things. I'm looking at their limb length, right? How long are their arms? That is a big factor. How thick are their limbs? Do they have long, thick or long, thin? They have short, thick or short, thin. So I'm looking at length. I'm looking at thickness. I'm looking at their athleticism, right? Which is very little I can do about that. I can make them slightly better, but I'm looking at what is their natural level of athleticism. I'm looking at what their default mindset is. Are they typically aggressive or are they defensive or passive? And I'm starting to build programs for that mindset, for that body type, for that movement and ability, coordination, whatever it may be. And I've tried to not just give guys my game. And what I find is that most of the other instructors that I'm around will teach their game, right? Like I'm teaching you my thing, but let's say you're not as athletic as me, or you're 100 pounds heavier than me and you're not super mobile, or vice versa. You're 5 foot tall and you're 100 pounds and you're a female who's never been in a real fight. I hope my legacy is that I've adjusted my teaching methods and processes and my articulation of things in a way that helps a broad spectrum of people. And if you looked at my IG feed, you probably saw Nick Turnbow too, right? So Nick Turnbow has cerebral palsy. And I like working with him because he's limited in what he can do. And it's selfish in a way because when I teach him, I have to figure out how to show him a move that achieves the same objective using slightly different techniques or slightly different angles because he doesn't move the same way a person is who doesn't have any restrictions. Cerebral palsy limits what he can do. Now he's got more flexibility, more strength, more range of motion than he's ever had, but he still has limitations. And so for me as an instructor, I want him to learn. I want to give him as close as I can to what everybody else is doing, but I know that it needs to be modified. So those are the kinds of challenges that I like to have as an older guy teaching jiu-jitsu. And I hope that my legacy kind of is seen in that light.
That's awesome. I had a 400-pound training partner, so that resonates a bit. When I first started my first gym, he was 400 pounds, was a white belt when I was probably like 4-stripe white belt. He was a new white belt. And we had to actually figure almost everything out for his body type. And I, again, enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because it put a little bit of teaching on me. We'd sit and sometimes we'd just go train together and just figure out how does this work for you? Yeah. And he was okay with it. He was comfortable with it. He was comfortable with me, talking about, okay, your legs are too, he was really tall, but like his legs was obviously so thick. It was just like, he's not throwing up triangles, So, so that really resonates.
The thing for me with that is coming back to really basic concepts, right? Not jiu-jitsu techniques, but concepts where you're starting to say, look, this is a game of space, right? So if I'm attacking, I need to take space from you, right? Whether it's space around your neck, your leg, or whatever it may be. If I'm defending, I have to figure out how to create space. Even if I want to throw a wedge in there, I have to find a way to create space first before that happens, so that you can't finish me and then I can put that wedge there. So figuring out certain positions that are challenges requires an understanding of the most basic components of jiu-jitsu. And that for me is where the value is at. And that's also why, you know, when we look at military and law enforcement stuff, why it still translates, where the technique might be trash for that application or in that environment, the concept still works. And that's the beautiful thing in jiu-jitsu. All of the concepts translate, right? When you talk about space control, or you talk about angles, or you talk about leverage, or you talk about strategies, all of that stuff translates to military and law enforcement, executive protection, whatever. So that's why I stick to the concepts over a physical technique.
So my last question is probably one of the most serious questions that we typically ask guests. You had that beautiful, beautiful black belt that you took out. Do you or do you not wash your belt?
I come from a 30-year-old school, so no.
I already knew.
I don't wash my belt. Yeah, look, I'm an old dude coming from training with the Brazilians my whole life. I never had any coach other than Rodrigo Vaghi and Rickson Gracie. You know, like that, because of the voodoo, because of the mysticism, because of whatever, there's this idea that you're washing away, you know, the experience and whatever else. I don't believe that. But I don't wash the belt. So another guy that came up with me, my roommate in LA at Hickson, is a guy named Henry Akins. I was training at his house before US Nationals, and we got to training. He's like, "Hey, you want me to throw your stuff in the wash?" I'm like, "Yeah." He throws in my belt and gi. I had never had my belt cleaned before. So Henry came from the same school, but he's like, "F that. There's no way. I'm not leaving this nasty, dirty belt out." Like, and threw it in. So I get both sides of it. I'm not into mysticism or anything like that, but that's kind of how I came up, and I've kept that tradition.
So I was a belt washer up to black belt. I have not washed my black belt yet. I do spray it now. I spray it with I don't know if there's a bottle of wipes that we use from a company called Nutrizone across the studio here. I don't know if Christian can get that, but they also have a spray. So you can see it all the way up there in the corner. I don't know if you see it on screen. I use those wipes to clean the headphones whenever I come in, because other people film here. And there's a spray. So it's either the Nutrizone spray or Lysol. I kind of go back and forth. And I just spray it down and I hang it. First time I've ever done that. I've had other than white belt, I had multiple belts. Oh, I always had two belts. So I've just always threw one in, maybe grab the other one, let it dry, and so just always had two belts. No, never a big deal.
It makes logical sense.
The only person that's given me the only like good excuse that I got in my mind was Wagner. Wagner Hocha said we did an interview in our Miami studio. He was sitting right next to me. His wife is here. He's sitting, so we were like really close. And he just looked at me like I was a complete idiot. He's just like, "You don't wash your belt. You're like." It's a way of deceiving your coach and making him think that you've trained more, right? Because it fades more, so it looks like you've trained more. And I was like, I never thought about that. That's the only, okay, I get that from a coach's perspective, right?
That's a fact, dude. That to me is very similar to guys who are doing this all the time and like
trying to. Oh, really? Yeah, I've never done that.
Yeah. So well, luckily in my case, that's another conversation. We could talk for hours about that, but my coach doesn't have cauliflower ear, and he's a world champion. He's a great stud. Rickson Gracie doesn't have cauliflower ear. He's a stud. So I never felt like I needed to be a jiu-jitsu guy. I needed to have cauliflower ear. So, but I agree. I know a lot of guys that wash their belt with the intent of making it look ragged, so you believe they're more experienced than
I get it for the outside, but when he said that to me, he's like, "You're making it look like you train more to your coach." And I'm like, but I'm like, it's such an intimate relationship. I'm in a gym where he knows when I'm there.
The coach,
he knows when I'm not there,
Yeah, I don't see it from that perspective. I see what he's saying, but I see it from the perspective of like, whether it's in the old days, we could compete with belts that were tattered. Now in IBJJF, they won't let you compete. You have to have almost brand new belt, and it has to be clean and whatever else. But I see his point, but I agree with you. Your coach knows what your level is. And also, there's no deception in jiu-jitsu when there's that first contact. That first contact changes everything. Right away if a guy's experienced or not experienced, if he's good, if he's not good, if he's technical, he's not technical, if he's strong or powerful or not. Like, so you can't deceive him for very long, maybe at a distance, but in reality, when it comes time to spar, everybody knows who everybody else is.
The mats don't lie.
They do not.
They do not. Todd, thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate you being here. I want to give you a second to, if you want, any shout outs, anybody that you're working with, this is your time to, say whatever you want, or again, please include any of your handles that you want to give out, and, we'll start to wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me and giving me or sharing with me your platform
Pleasure, man.
to
Pleasure.
talk about these things. I think we had a lot in common. The book Underpinning is out now. It's on all the major platforms. You can go to tourprotection.com and get it there, or you can go to Apple or Amazon or any other place. You can get it in digital. I'm passionate about the military. I'm passionate about law enforcement. I'm passionate about jiu-jitsu and fighting and Muay Thai and MMA and all that stuff. But I'm most passionate about seeing people who don't have the same skills as maybe I do or other professional level fighters do. So, my shout outs typically are to Nick Turnbow, a guy that is a motivator, a guy that works his ass off, a guy that comes to the table with little but develops a lot and has the best growth rate of anybody I've seen, whether it's in, a weightlifting gym or in the jiu-jitsu gym. So if you guys haven't heard of him, check him out. He's on Instagram at Nick Turnbow. I am on Instagram at Tour Training because I'm normally touring and we typically are training in the process. And again, my website is tourprotection.com. So again, thanks for the platform.
Awesome.
I appreciate good chat.
Unlock the power of your online presence with Black Belt Digital Marketing. Their reputation management program ensures your Google business profile is seen by more potential customers. Black Belt Digital Marketing is your full-service digital marketing agency specializing in local SEO and reputation management. Boost your business today. Visit bbdigitalmarketing.com. Your success is their priority.
Special thank you to the crew over at Flow and Roll for all their support. Flow and Roll is renowned for their incredible no-gi rash guards, shorts, and leggings. Flow and Roll has quickly become the premier custom apparel provider for academies big and small throughout the United States. Reach out today to discuss your custom order and ask about their incredible pre-order program. You can send an email to flowandroll@gmail.com or visit their Instagram at flow_n_roll and shoot them a direct message. And yes, they can create an awesome custom gi for your academy as well. Visit flowandroll.com to check out their awesome designs, and while you're there, pick up a Jiu-Jitsu Dummy signature tee exclusively at flowandroll.com. And remember, you'll get 20% off your purchase of t-shirts, rash guards, or gis with code JJD.
Let me just give a couple of quick shout-outs here. We'll wrap it up, and then we'll take those pictures and let you go. I think, look, we'll get it done in under 140, like we said. I was shooting for 130, but you said 140, so we're good. So shout-out to combatcbds.com. You get 20% off with code JJD. They've got all different types of CBDs. They've got gummies. They've got the tinctures, and they even have the tincture for pets. Shout-out to bioproteintech.com. You get $30 off with code JJD on the regularly priced kits, so your orders typically totaling $295 or more, so that's the morning and the nighttime kit usually is what people are going to get, and then you can use code JJD for $30 off. The BJJ box is back with us as well. Check them out at thebjjbox.com, and you get 20% off with code JJD20. All right, so I believe that's everything. You can check us out at Jiu-Jitsu Dummies, basically on every platform for all the ways to watch, listen, and support. My personal IG is Uncle Milty BJJ on Instagram. Please, please, please donate, or at very least share. You can go to academysafe.org. We've got our landing page up. We're blogging while we build the full site. And you can donate either through GoFundMe or through PayPal. Both of those give you an option to set up a recurring donation. So if you want to do $5 a month for the next year, you can set that up, and it automates it. So please, 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 we could use all the help. And if you can't donate, I'm fine with that. Please share. Everybody's got social media. Share it on your social and very much help us out. So once again, Todd, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you. Thank you for watching and listening, everybody. Peace, love, jiu-jitsu. Yos.